workshop meeting. I'm gonna ask Scott to lead us in prayer, if everybody will stand.
Just join me in prayer. Father, we just come to you today, and we thank you for the blessings that you provided for us, Father. We just ask that you lift over us, Father. You watch over us, you protect us, Father. We ask that you guide us today. You help us make the right decisions as we move forward. And Father, we just, again, thank you for all the wonderful blessings that you provided for us in this moment. Father, we just thank you for everything that you've given to us. In your name we pray. Amen.
Amen. And I think we'll just leave the flag, and we'll do that in a little while. If that's all right. Let the record show that Desiree Davis is not present. She may get here in the next few minutes. And Scott, I'll turn it over to you, or we'll turn it over to Mr. Gallagher.
But I'll kick it off there. This is the compensation study, and I will let Eric, who is with us, you can kind of see his little square on the screen over there. But he is with us today. He's actually in Tennessee and working that, so he'll be presenting through Teams presentation, going over the handout for us. But this is something that has been coming up several times since I've been here in the last 3 months, is the compensation for employees. And part of those discussions have led to us finding a compensation study that was done back in 21 by Gallagher, but that was never presented to the council or the department heads. And so we reached out to Eric and have been working with Eric for the last, I guess, month or so, trying to get that presentation back up to date so that it's more relevant for today. And so we're using all the data, all the surveys that were done back in 21, we're utilizing that information. The recommendations that were done in 21, you'll see those being what was presented. And so what we've updated, of course, is new people, new positions, new salaries that have been done since that time. And then also, you'll see that there's also some kind of a multiplier that they've used to get the cost of living or those numbers from what was in 21 to today. And so, again, Eric will go over that in more detail. He has a presentation to present to you, several slides. You received a draft copy of it in your packet last week, and he has a few things that he is adding to that, and we'll be going over with you today on that presentation. And then he also has the information, the meat and the potatoes that he can kind of go over if y'all have got specific questions. And so today, right now, we're looking at doing the workshop. So this is a discussion. It's a time for the council to discuss, to get information, and kind of decide, how we want to deal with this and move forward. And hopefully maybe come up with a way of how we would like to implement this going forward, whether that's now or in the future, or a combination of now and in the future. We do have an agenda item during our regular meeting tonight, and so what we'd be asking for the council to do at that time is just to accept the study. They've done the work, they're presenting it to us, so we would accept the study, and then with that, we could also do an implementation, or y'all can provide us with some kind of implementation on how we want to move forward. I'm assuming that may be done during the workshop and maybe just reiterated during the meeting tonight. But that is on the agenda. We do need to accept it from them, officially accept the study. No matter what we do with the study, we do need to accept it and move forward from that point. So with that, as kind of an introduction, I would like to introduce Eric. He's on the screen there with the presentation. So, Eric, if you would, I'll turn it over to you.
Scott, we'll go in there.
Can you make it bigger so we can see it?
He was on there.
Yeah, he's on the corner.
Well, he's small so that you can see the
Yeah,
slide.
but he was all the way on there a while ago.
On the third page, that half tower's background.
Can y'all see me better now?
Yes.
Okay, I'll throw the slide back up in a second after I introduce myself.
All right, hold on. We do have a question before we get started.
Okay.
On page 3, and it's headed as background. The very bottom line is very tiny, small, and I'm going to read it. It says, the 22-23 re-engagement was at no cost to the city and is considered an extension of the service provided in 2021. I'd like to know why it wasn't presented in 2021, and what did this study cost the city?
Is that a question to me? I'm sorry, sir?
Whoever can answer it.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, I can't speak to it. I wasn't with the practice in 21. What I know is that a draft deliverable at that time was provided to the city secretary for provision to the council. And it does not appear at that time that it was provided to the city council.
Can you answer the other question? How much did this study cost the city of Cleveland?
I would have to review that. I don't have that number off the top of my head, but I can certainly review that and send it to you all later this evening.
I can tell you how much it costs, because I asked Tiffany just moments ago. And it's $26,793.75.
That's great. Why did we not get it reported to us before now?
Couldn't have that.
Eric, I'm assuming this was under Bobby's, right?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the question.
He wasn't here.
21, Bobby.
I know, I'm talking about this
Oh.
gentleman.
Oh, if he wasn't.
Yeah, okay, I understand.
Okay, move forward. I just
Okay. So let me introduce myself and then we go into the presentation unless there are additional questions that you might have. My name is Eric Santana. I'm a managing director with Gallagher's Public Sector and Higher Education Practice. What we do, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment, is we work with cities, counties, state governmental bodies. Yes, sir. Was there a question? I'm sorry.
No, go ahead, Eric.
Okay. On issues related to HR practices, compensation, and classification. And I will share my screen here. You all can see this. You all see the slide, full screen?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. And so this is an update of that work that was completed in 2021 with 2023 updates relative to trend factors, etc. So here's the items that I'd like to cover with you and talk through tonight. Just give some background, talk about our practice qualifications, review the 21 study findings at a high level, discuss the 23 update, additional recommendations that are tied to that update, and then next steps as we might see them. So from background perspective, in 21, the city engaged with our practice to conduct an external labor study. At that time, a comprehensive benchmarking study was done, revised compensation structure and pay ranges were developed, positions at the city were assessed relative to that structure, and at that time, implementation costing details were developed and provided. This past December, the city reached back out to us to indicate that that project had not been provided to the city council for consideration, and so we re-engaged a little more than a month ago with the city manager's office, the HR office, and myself. And through that, we reviewed that previous compensation structure and put some updates into that based on 22 and 23 market trend data. We assessed the city's positions and how they may have evolved relative to turnover, hiring, etc., to ensure that it was up to date, and we prepared updated implementation costing details. And that note at the bottom, as you indicated previously, Councilman, just indicate that for this update, there were no additional charges to that than what had already been previously provided as part of the last study. In terms of our background and qualifications, we're a part of Arthur J. Gallagher and Company. We're an international advisory, risk management, and insurance provider. In that space, we are the public sector and higher education practice. And so we have been in business within our particular practice for nearly 40 years, working, as I said before, with city, county, state governmental bodies, higher education bodies, special districts, authorities, K-12 school districts, etc. We have offices nationwide, including in Texas. We have documented municipal and public sector experience, and we have experience specifically with Texas organizations across the state. In addition to our comp class services, the other services that our practice provides with a fair degree of frequency are outlined at the bottom.
Hey, Eric, I got a question. Oh, you
Yes.
did this in 21. Did the city use that data to do the 22 budget, I'm assuming?
From my understanding, sir, that the information was provided to the city secretary, but I'm not sure if it was leveraged in any way beyond that provision in May of 21.
I've talked to the department heads, and they've never seen the study that was done, and so I'm assuming if they never saw it, then it probably was not utilized for the budgeting. Now, again, we don't know. I wasn't here, Eric wasn't here, at that point, so was it utilized or not, I don't know, but I'm assuming probably not, since the department heads never saw it, to be able to utilize it to help create the budget.
It's just weird that we'd spend that much money.
And it was there.
Is that a question?
It's been there the whole time.
No, go ahead, Eric.
From the, looking at the, yes. Was there a comment? I'm sorry.
No.
Okay, sorry. 21 study findings. What we find from that, or what that particular study found, was that relative to the market, employee pay was lagging. When we talk about the market, we tend to talk about it in one of three ways: either market lagging, market aware, or market leading. And generally within that, within 5%, give or take, tends to be sort of market aware within the market rate. Within 10% or less than that, tends to be market leading as you're above the P50 or the 50th percentile. And anything more than 10% tends to be considered market lagging. So as we look at the 21 data, there are three ways to look at that particular information. There was published survey information that was leveraged, and so those are from reputable survey sources such as Mercer, Willis Towers Watson, CompData, etc., that are national survey providers that allow for cuts of data at the state and metropolitan statistical area level or regional levels. So that was partially incorporated. A custom survey was conducted of comparators identified with the city at that time to collect information from those unique cities, and then the data was then combined together to look at that holistically. So relative to the published survey, the city was lagging the market by roughly 20%, just shy of 20%. From the custom survey perspective, 3.7%. When that data was combined and blended together, it was lagging that market rate of just over 12% relative to that. At the time for the 21 findings, a couple of implementation approaches were identified relative to those findings. The first of which was to bring all employees to the new range minimum. The second of which being to bring those employees to into the new range based on their years in their current position. So a longevity approach, or what we might call a range penetration approach. At that time, depending on which option might have been selected, there was a variance in the possible costs there. So if we break that down, at the time in 21, the cost to bring all employees into the minimum of their new ranges was just over $166,000, so just shy of 3.5% of the total payroll, representing roughly 30 increases, with 5 employees being above the maximum of their new range. If the approach had been selected to move forward based on the longevity approach, that had a more significant fiscal impact, with a cost anticipated of $685,666, with a percent of payroll of just over 14%, representing roughly 57 increases and still maintaining those 5 individuals above the max within those ranges. So to recap from the 21 findings, the implementation approaches, there were 2. One was to bring into the new range minimum for all employees. The other was to maintain their position within the pay range based on where they were at that time. And those costs ranging from $166,000 to almost $686,000 based on approach. As we look at the 2023 update, we looked at and reviewed the grade and range placements. We updated the salary structure based on actual salary trend movement. And so we look at 2022 data as well as 2023 data from World at Work. And World at Work is a leading provider of compensation data analytics and survey information nationally, especially within the space of salary range and market movement trend data. And so sort of the gold source, if you will. The 2022 actuals for that trend movement were 3% in the state of Texas. We aren't able to drill that down further directly. And the projected 23 trend movement as of this past November was 4.2%. And so we updated the implementation costing details based on these metrics. That said, the city over the last couple of years have done some hiring. They've done some additional pay increases. They've addressed a number of things sort of internally through the course of regular business. And as a result of that, while you might have expected to see ground loss to the market, if you will, there wasn't significant ground loss to the market over the last 2 years because there have been sort of thoughtful actions that have taken place during that period of time that have maintained your position. So you haven't lost additional ground to the market since that 21 study. As we look at the 23 update, we have 3 implementation approaches that we would ask to be considered. The first, again, is to bring all employees to the new range minimum. The second is that longevity approach to maintain that 2021 range penetration within the structure. And then the third would be to bring all employees to the new range midpoint, essentially the market rate, if you will, based on the pay structure itself. So depending upon sort of that implementation approach that's decided, those costs range from $125,000 to $835,000. In both of these cases, from the cost of minimum or the longevity, that is less than what the 21 projections were. The cost to market is a new implementation option relative to that. As we look at the cost of minimum, that is $125,000, roughly a little more than 2% of payroll. As we look at the cost to midpoint, that represents $835,000, so just shy of 14% of the payroll. And as we look at that longevity or range penetration maintenance, that's $486,000, and just over 8% of payroll. In that range penetration option, a larger number of employees would receive increases, but it's a smaller overall increase than the cost of midpoint. Whereas the cost of midpoint has slightly more employees receiving increases than the cost of minimum, but a much more significant cost. So as we think about this from a broader perspective, in terms of the recommendations related to this, one of the things that we recommend for you on going forward is having guidelines that reflect how the city wishes to approach individuals coming into a pay range or moving through that structure. And so from a high-level overview, when we tend to think about those things philosophically, we would expect to see employees who are early in their career or early in a role, so typically in the first 5 years of employment or in those first 5 years of a role, to be in sort of the first tri-tile of a pay range. As an individual becomes seasoned and well established at what they do, and they gain high proficiency. So in that 5 to 10 year mark, we would anticipate seeing them hovering around the market rate more often than not. There's certainly reasons why someone might be above or below that, but on average. You would anticipate to see someone around that market point. And then for those individuals with 10 plus years of experience doing that work, really sort of being an expert in that particular functional space, maybe sustaining a high level of performance, we would expect to see them over the market rate or midpoint. It is a somewhat typical piece. And so you would have employees who are distributed across those pay ranges over time relative to their tenure, their sustained performance, et cetera, with the city in their role in areas of expertise. And so this kind of breaks this out visually to demonstrate that notion of where you might expect to see individuals over time as you might implement the structure and the framework. Further recommendations, we recommend that the salary structure be adjusted by the trend factor every year to remain competitive with the market. And this is certainly something that we could either train the city to do on a going forward basis, or we could assist in doing that, whatever the preference of the city might be. But updating that on an annual basis allows for that market awareness on a going forward basis. Thinking about salary advancement through the structure, we would recommend that it should be linked to performance or other quantifiable measures so that it is an objective process by which one moves through the pay range. Additionally, we would recommend that the salary structure continue to be adjusted, as I said, annually, but that a comprehensive market study be conducted every 3 to 5 years. This study reflects 2021 sort of base data, and that typically we would see a study of the broader nature performed again sometime between 2024 and 2026 based on the city's direction and need. Next steps relative to this information. We provide the findings to you for review. You would look through and work through determining any method for communicating the results and next steps to your internal stakeholders as you deem appropriate. You would approve the study results, decide on an implementation option or not that works best to implement that information, and then in light of the study findings, you would work to determine what your compensation philosophy and supporting strategies might be on a going forward basis relative to market placement, range movement, etc. That concludes the slides. More than happy to have conversation or talk through any specifics that you might have.
I have a question for you. When you make these comparisons, are you making between a city of 8,000 population, or are you using the same numbers when you're representing like Houston, Fort Worth, Tyler, these larger cities?
I'm not sure I caught all that. I heard city of 8,000 was all I caught.
Yeah, our city of 8,000, our population is a certain size. When you compare salaries to other cities that are much larger, it's hard to compare.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, and so as we think about that, and one of the items reflected in the 21 data is that we leverage data from the Economic Research Institute to essentially allow us to look at the geographic differences relative to cost of living and cost of labor amongst cities for certain roles, so that we can say the cost of living or labor in the city of Cleveland is X, even though we may have pulled comparator data from a different city that was larger or smaller, that allows us to make apples and oranges into apples and apples. To say, we recognize that this particular city has a higher cost of labor, and therefore we would discount their rate of pay, or vice versa, someone has a lower cost of labor, and we provide a premium to reflect that information relative to your information. Because you're absolutely right, sir, that every city is unique, and so the best way in order to leverage that data is to take that information in terms of the difference of the cost of labor and cost of living, so that we're ensuring that it's a more equal comparison.
And Eric, I'm assuming this includes, like the city manager, that includes department heads. Did you break it down into actual, not department heads, just employees that work for the city versus the, say, the top, the city manager and the department head? Did you single it
Yeah.
out? I mean,
Yes, and so the study from 21 and then the updated study that I can speak to more directly looks at all positions from the city manager on down. So it's
but what I'm saying,
comprehensive
we
based
just hired
on.
Scott, so we're not gonna give him a big raise. Well, we may. I'm not gonna say we won't. Miss May don't want a raise.
No, I'm here for free.
I have another question. Has this study taken the fact that just this year, we gave the employees a 3% incentive cost of living raise, and then I think there was another 2% from that. Is that included in this study update?
Yes, the information, the most recent information we have, I think was from this January, the census data from the city. So it would be reflective of any data from the beginning of this month.
Is that why the numbers went from 2021 to 165,000 to, I think the latest was 125?
That is absolutely part of it. Part of it is it's reflective of the fact that increases have been delivered, and so that draws down some of that cost. And then those ranges have gone up slightly based on the trend factor. But yes, those increases that you've delivered have reduced that cost to minimum and reduced that range penetration cost overall because of that proactive nature of the increases you've already delivered.
Eric, did you actually give, I know we don't have it in our packet, I mean, do you have the figures, the actual payroll figures per department?
Let me pull it up here. And so I do, let me share here what we have. This is a lot of information, so bear with me a little bit. And so we have this so that it can be broken down by the specific department. And so this is part of the final deliverable to the city along with the presentation, is be able to say, here is the 23 updated structure, here's the 21 updated structure, here's our grade distribution by the departments. So they'll look at those different department units, see what that distribution of pay grades are, be able to look at sort of what does that pay distribution look like. We have the 21 market data here, is for reference, and then we break it down in this way to say, here are the departments, there are the titles, so we could look at any given department to assess the specific cost to that unit overall within that. And then here at the top, we have that broken down, be able to talk about sort of what do those numbers look like from a high level versus the 21 data that you can see here comparatively. And then what does that mean relative to the employees that are current employees as of today, in terms of where are they at relative to the recommended pay range? So are they in range, being green? Are they below the midpoint, but in the range, yellow, below the minimum, red, above the max?
Eric, you know I can't see that. Can anybody see that?
Sorry, I'm not sure how big your screen is.
Why don't we have it in our?
Well, I think we will get it.
It's green, it's not red.
Yeah. Well,
Well,
I figure Adam could read it, he's right there at it.
You want me to go up there and put the
No.
pointer on that?
That's all right. But I think we need that, I think we need to see it, you know, on paper before we decide. Because the way this looks, you're either saying that we're gonna do the 125, we're gonna do the 486, or we're gonna do the 800, you know, and that's hard to determine.
Well, I think that's where it goes to where Eric was saying we've got to adopt a philosophy. What do you want to see done at this point? Do we want to see people going to at least the minimum? Do we want to see our employees being, 10% below market, 10% above market? I'm just throwing numbers out there, but what is the philosophy that the city has, and how do we want to implement that? And so that's, I mean, he's got that information, that's the data, but it's got to be tweaked to match whatever that implementation that the council chooses to move forward with. And it may be that we choose a path today for, you know, if we want to try to do something now, and then having another goal or another step to implement that come budget time next October, so we can work on that through the budget process. There is no money in the budget right now to do anything, so whatever we do, if we decide to do anything now, this will be one of those things that we would have to go back and figure out how we're going to pay for anything that gets implemented at this time. Whether that's, you know, we go back with department heads and determine how we can do budget cuts to find the funding to be able to implement this process. Whether it's, you know, we do have some reserves, but I do caution utilizing reserves because this is an ongoing cost, an ongoing expense, and it's going to be a reoccurring as we move forward. And so it's something we want to have to budget every year to make up this difference. But I know I've visited with the leadership team. They are willing to look at their budgets to do something depending on what direction the council wants to move forward. And again, that could be whether it's just bringing everybody to minimum or whether it's wanting to keep that longevity. And maybe we do the longevity, but we only do 25% now, and then maybe another 25% or 50% next, you know, in the fiscal year in October. And then we do it the next year, we take that full step, so it's a 3-step process. Because we do know our budgets are tight, and it is going to have to come out of the budget, and we'll have to find those funds. But as we've all have seen, we need to do something with compensation for our employees. And this is the information that we need to be able to do that across the board to the employees. And so that's the philosophy, that's where the discussion needs to occur. And Eric is here, that he can kind of help with that discussion when you're having questions on different philosophies and so forth.
You know, Scott, we have a lot of unfilled positions here in the city. We have those funds budgeted for those positions, and they've been unfulfilled for quite a while. Is that not anything we could use for the time being?
No, that is definitely something that we would look at to be able to utilize.
Because we do have funds there.
Right.
And could you tell us how many vacant positions that we have? That information we would also need as well.
You know, Angela, you know how many vacancies we have right now?
Currently there's 5.
5 vacancies across the city.
Okay. And where they are, what department? I would like to get a current copy of the city pay scale and the approved positions and whatever information that he has so that we can have something to make some comparisons with.
And I agree. I think this is just a start, and if we get the other information, we'll, I'm assuming, accept this in the county meeting.
Right.
But it's hard for us to say, hey, you know, we don't have the money. Not like the government, we just can't print it.
And the information that he has up there that he will be providing does have the current salaries for the positions that we currently have in there. But then it also shows if you were to go with the minimum, or bringing everybody up to the minimum, what that cost would be across the board, what it would be if you did the longevity, and what it would be if you did the market, if you brought everybody to market or that midpoint.
And that's actually showing salaries, Scott?
Correct.
In other words, we say we go to the minimum, say this year, and then use the rest of it, go look at budgets for next year, they'll actually give us what.
Correct, and that's where, like the $125,000, that's where it came from, all those positions, and, you know, bringing up everybody to at least the minimum. Now, you know, that's one of the things that you've got to consider when you do either the bringing everybody to the minimum or bringing everybody to the midpoint or the market comparison is that you create a compression of your employees. And so you remember that bell curve where you've got 10 to 20 people at the beginning, you've got 40 to 60, or 60 to 80 people kind of in the middle, another 10 to 20 percent of employees on the outside. And so you want to, based on years of experience and education and so forth, you want that to have that nice bell curve in there. If you bring everybody to the minimal, then you're going to see a compression of employees towards that minimum figure. If you bring everybody to market, then you're going to see a compression at that market level of employees. And so, just a caution, I guess, or just that will be a result if you do one of those. But again, this is something this is a one-time. We talked about we need to do something with compensation for our employees. We've got this. It was never presented or implemented, and so this would be a first step. We still need to continue, and like Eric was saying, this is something we need to look at every year to make sure that we are staying competitive and staying within the market and looking at those numbers on an annual basis. And then the recommendation is every 3 to 5 years doing a comprehensive study utilizing a full-blown comprehension into the market study. And so,
This needs to be done prior to your budget.
correct. If we can utilize this information that he will provide for our budget this coming year, we'll just need to have direction from council. Where are we looking at moving?
But we may say that in all, this may tell us, but then we may say, well, we may need additional people in public works, or we may need somebody that where we're not getting the people in. This is just sort of blankets. It doesn't really tell you until we see the rest of the information from Eric.
I have a question for my fellow councilman. Do you understand when I asked the question, are you comparing this to other cities our size? Because it's very important. You can't compare what we pay public works guys here to somebody in Fort Worth, what they probably have 2 or 3 public works people. So we've got to fit our budget to the size of our city.
That's true.
I think everybody understands that. I mean, so we're not asking to vote on until just to accept it.
Tonight, basically, is to accept it, and then if y'all want to implement something, you got to give us some direction on what you would like for us to do. Because obviously, unless you do one of the 3 options, we don't know what that's going to be. And so we would have to get back with you. And even if you do with one of the 3 options, we're going to need to get together as an executive team to try to figure out how we're going to come up with the funding to do whatever option that you choose at this point.
And I think we all,
That's a good idea.
and we need to look at
We need to do
what
that.
the numbers are and what we're getting out of it.
So what are we accepting? I mean, are we accepting this without the
Just
additional
not,
information?
just what he's given to us, not
Okay.
what we're gonna do until we see more figures, on what the compensation actually will be. So, Eric, do you have anything else?
Yeah, I just, as you think about sort of the approach in your considerations of the data, that there are some things that I would encourage you to sort of keep in mind is that, as Scott indicated, it's not uncommon to take a multi-year approach to something like this. So you might look ahead and address these items. It's fairly common to do this over a cycle of 1, 2, and in some cases even 3 years, depending on what your approach might be relative to your implementation options. So I'd ask you to keep that in mind as you look at it. And then to the point of also sort of the compression piece, just to bear that in mind that all of these are viable options, and really whatever approach you decide is certainly a viable option. But relative to bringing everyone up to a certain sort of key point, whether that's the minimum or the midpoint, that does have the potential to create some compression that while maybe not an immediate issue, could certainly pose some challenges or opportunities as you look ahead from a compression factor of employees with varied tenures of service being paid approximately the same on a going forward. So just ask that as you think about this, and you dig into sort of the thoughts around it, those are things just to stay cognizant of
So
when you
you're
go through that
saying,
thought process.
You're saying, Eric, if we say we pick the $500,000, we might not implement that over 1 year, it could be 2 to 3 years.
Certainly, certainly.
You know, our money,
Yes.
if we want to do everything we can, then we can't put it all in payroll, but we can certainly address it, I think. And the council, I think, wants to do that.
Mhm.
Scott?
Yes, it,
Um,
sorry, go ahead.
Well, just one other thing is, I mean, basically, like again, tonight we wanted to accept this. Are we looking at doing another workshop in the near future to continue this discussion? Are we wanting to wait till budget? What is the council's thought on this?
We need to do another workshop.
Well, I think we need to get all the
We don't need to wait
figures
till
and
budget.
then have another workshop.
Absolutely.
And get more involved in what it will actually, who gets it and where it goes. Council, don't worry.
Correct, I agree with that.
Okay.
You do. Okay. If there's nothing else, we'll adjourn this meeting and we'll start the council meeting in about 15 minutes.
Thank you, Eric.